He stood beneath the city lights, every flash of a camera painting him as untouchable. But behind the glitter, behind the smile, a storm brewed. The woman he trusted, the one he built his empire beside, was already planning his collapse. Success blinded him. Love betrayed him. Before the cameras, before the billion-dollar headlines, there was a boy in a cramped apartment where silence spoke louder than laughter. Plates often sat half empty, and the only warmth came from a flickering bulb above the dinner table. His mother, exhausted yet unbroken, juggled 2 jobs just to keep a roof above their heads. For Sebastian, hunger wasn't just in his stomach, it was in his heart. He watched his classmates wear shoes his family could never afford, saw them, leave for vacations he could only dream of. Each moment carved something deeper inside him, a fire that refused to die. He swore he'd never let poverty define him again. Success wasn't a luxury in his mind, it was survival. And while the world saw a quiet boy with tired eyes, inside him lived a storm, waiting to break free. In the middle of his lonely climb, when survival was his only language, Sebastian met Emily. She wasn't drawn to his empty wallet or his broken shoes. She saw the fire in his eyes, the unshaken will that most people mocked. Where others doubted, she believed, her smile became his shelter. After days of rejection, when doors slammed and voices ridiculed, he'd return to her arms, and suddenly the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Emily didn't just listen. She dreamed with him. She'd sit across the table, sketching plans on napkins, whispering, "One day this world will know your name." For Sebastian, love wasn't roses or promises. It was her standing beside him when there was nothing to gain. She gave him courage when his own began to fade. In a world that called him foolish, Emily made him feel invincible, and in that belief he thought he'd found forever. With every step forward, Sebastian hit another wall. Investors sat across, polished desks, glanced at his proposal, and smirked as if his dream was a child's fantasy. Some didn't even bother to hide their laughter. "Impossible," they said. "You'll never compete." Even his closest friends shook their heads, warning him to quit before he wasted his life. But giving up wasn't in his blood. He carried too many nights of hunger, too many memories of his mother's tired eyes, to surrender now. Yet the weight was unbearable. Days turned into weeks of rejection, his hope slipping like sand through his fingers. And still, there was Emily. When he walked home defeated, she didn't ask how many doors closed. She simply placed her hand on his, whispering, words that patched the holes inside him. "You'll make it, I know you will." Those words weren't just comfort, they were oxygen. They fueled his tired body, steadied his breaking heart, and convinced him that maybe, just maybe, the world was wrong. Together, in that small apartment with nothing but faith, they chose to keep fighting. And Sebastian believed, as long as Emily was there, failure could never win. The dream was alive, but survival was brutal. Nights came when the fridge rattled empty, holding nothing but a bottle of water and a half-used jar of peanut butter. Sebastian and Emily would sit across from each other at the table, sharing a single plate of food, not because they wanted to, but because that's all they had. Bills stacked higher than their confidence, each envelope stamped with red warnings that screamed louder than their neighbors. And when the knocking came, heavy fists of debt collectors demanding what he didn't have, Sebastian felt the shame of being powerless. His body grew weaker, sleep often replaced by endless hours at a dim laptop screen, chasing a future that seemed to slip further away. His eyes were tired, but his spirit refused to break. He told himself the hunger was temporary, the darkness only a chapter, and in that struggle, Emily's presence meant everything. She sat beside him in the silence, her hand resting on his shoulder as if to say, "We'll get through this." Sebastian believed her. He believed they were carrying the same weight, walking the same road, and that belief gave him the strength to fight one more day. It was a cold evening, the kind where dreams felt heavier than the air itself. Sebastian and Emily sat in a corner of a dim cafe, nursing one cheap cup of coffee they stretched between them. Around them, he noticed something unusual. People staring at glossy catalogues, pointing at watches, bags, shoes they could never afford. Their eyes longed, but their wallets refused. And that's when it struck him. The problem wasn't the dream of luxury. It was the wall between people and access. What if he could tear that wall down? What if high-end products weren't just for the elite, but for everyone? He leaned across the table, his voice trembling with excitement. Emily, imagine a marketplace online. Luxury within reach. Discounts, accessibility, no gatekeepers. Her eyes lit up, the way they always did when he spoke of the impossible. That cafe, with its flickering lights and cracked walls, became the birthplace of an empire. A simple idea, born from watching ordinary people's struggles, turned into Sebastian's vision, and with Emily smiling across from him, he believed they could build something the world had never seen before. The cafe's spark turned into a battlefield. Nights blurred into mornings as Sebastian sat hunched over a glowing screen, fingers blistered from endless coding, eyes burning from sleepless hours. The world outside slept, but inside that tiny apartment, the war for a dream never stopped. Every morning, he put on his cheapest shirt, walked into boardrooms and pitched with a fire that ignored rejection. When the servers threatened to crash, he pawned his watch, even sold his childhood guitar, each sacrifice buying them just one more day online. And slowly, the numbers began to speak. 1,000 users signed up, then 10,000. Finally, an investor shook his hand, placing not just money but belief into Sebastian's vision. Hope for the first time felt tangible, and each time exhaustion nearly broke him, he'd glance at Emily, still there, still smiling, still reminding him why they were fighting. Together, it felt unstoppable. The city that once ignored him now clamored for his attention. Headlines screamed Sebastian's name, calling him the new face of business, a genius who had turned nothing into millions. Investors crowded into meetings, eager to secure a piece of his vision. Flashbulbs popped and strangers shook his hand as if he were already untouchable. Every award, every recognition Sebastian shared with Emily. She stood beside him on stage, smiling as he spoke about teamwork, sacrifice, and the love that had kept him afloat. To him, she wasn't just a partner, she was the reason he could dream so big. Yet beneath the applause, there was an unseen tension. Whispers he didn't notice, glances she thought he wouldn't see. The girl who had once been his shelter was now a shadow with secrets, and though the world saw perfection, Sebastian was unknowingly walking toward the storm he could never predict. The rise was dazzling, intoxicating, and dangerously fragile. The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless drum that matched the panic in Sebastian's chest. He had returned earlier than expected, hoping to surprise Emily with dinner, a small celebration of their recent success, but the apartment was quiet, too quiet. Then he saw them. Emily, laughing, leaning close to the very investor who had believed in him. Every instinct screamed, every heartbeat froze. This wasn't a mistake, this wasn't a momentary lapse, this was calculated. It wasn't just love betrayed, it was trust, ambition, and the foundation of everything he had built. The deals, the investors, the empire he had dreamed of from a dim cafe, now poisoned by the two people he had trusted most. The shock clawed at him, stealing his breath. Words failed, tears burned, and anger roared quietly under the surface. The world he thought he knew shattered in an instant. Every memory of shared laughter, whispered plans, and sleepless nights now twisted into a nightmare. Sebastian realized, painfully, that betrayal could be more devastating than poverty, more crushing than failure, because it came from the one person he had given everything to. In the weeks that followed, the world seemed to turn against him overnight. Contracts vanished as if they had never existed. Accounts that once overflowed with promise were frozen, locked tight by betrayal and greed. The platform he had poured blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into crumbled before his eyes. Sebastian wandered through empty offices and deserted meeting rooms, the echoes of laughter and applause replaced by the cold silence of failure. Every call went unanswered, every door slammed shut, and through it all Emily's absence was deafening. The girl who had once whispered hope into his ears was now gone, walking away with the very man who had funded his dream. It wasn't just money that burned, It was trust, love, and the belief that hard work alone could protect him. The empire he had envisioned, the future he had fought for since childhood, dissolved into ash. Nights turned into endless darkness, and Sebastian faced a truth harsher than poverty. Some losses aren't just financial, they're personal. He had reached the summit, only to fall into an abyss deeper than any he had ever known. And in that void, he realized, the only way forward was to rebuild, stronger, smarter, unbreakable. The apartment smelled the same, a mix of stale air and memories he had tried to outrun. He sank onto the worn couch, the very one that had held his childhood dreams, and stared at the cracked walls. Silence filled the space like a heavy fog, each echo of his own breathing a reminder of what he had lost. No friends called. No investors answered. No Emily was there to soften the ache. He was utterly alone. The money, the fame, the empire, all gone in the blink of a stormy night. Questions clawed at him. Was it worth it? Did the dream justify the pain? Could he have seen the betrayal coming? Yet in the stillness, beneath the exhaustion and despair, a small ember glimmered. The boy who had survived hunger, poverty, and endless rejection wasn't gone. Sebastian's mind, sharp as ever, began to weave possibilities from the wreckage. Pain had stripped him bare, but it had also cleared the way for something new, something unstoppable. Alone in his apartment, Sebastian stared at the empty walls, letting the silence digest him. The heartbreak that had once crushed him now ignited a fierce determination. Pain was no longer a burden, it was fuel. Each memory of betrayal, every dollar lost, every sleepless night of sacrifice became a spark that lit a new fire inside him. He started again, step by step. This time, he measured every risk, planned every move, and learned from every mistake. No shortcuts, no blind trust, no illusions. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with strategy, calls, and coding marathons. Days blurred into weeks as he watched. His vision slowly rise from the ruins. One company became two, two became three. Each venture smarter, sharper, and more resilient than the last. He wasn't just rebuilding wealth, he was reclaiming his power, his identity, and his confidence. The boy who once trembled at poverty now moved with the precision of a seasoned conqueror. Through relentless drive, Sebastian transformed heartbreak into triumph, and every brick of his new empire bore the mark of a man forged by betrayal, yet unbroken. The spotlight now found him, not in a dim cafe or a cramped apartment, but on the cover of Forbes, the world's gaze fixed firmly on Sebastian. Cameras flashed, headlines blared, and analysts dissected his journey from nothing to unstoppable. He had arrived, yet the crown he wore was not gilded with romance or fortune. It was forged in betrayal. Every failure, every sleepless night, every heartbreak had sharpened him into something unyielding. He hadn't just rebuilt, he had conquered. Emily's name, once whispered with hope and love, had vanished from his narrative. She was a shadow of the past, a reminder that some who leave a mark on your heart also teach lessons that money and fame cannot buy. Sebastian's empire wasn't just about wealth. It was proof of resilience, strategy, and relentless will. He stood tall, a man reborn from ashes, a living testament to the power of rising when the world and the people you trust betray you. Sebastian's eyes, once haunted by loss, now gleamed with unshakable strength. Betrayal can destroy you or forge you, he said. His story isn't just his. It's a mirror for anyone who's been broken. Every struggle can ignite greatness. Watch, learn, rise, and stay, because the next story could change everything.